4,000 years before indoor plumbing became a modern convenience, someone in a city on the banks of the Indus River was already flushing waste through a brick-lined pipe, running beneath a paved street into a drain engineered to carry it away from their home. No emperor ordered it, no single genius designed it alone, and yet this system worked better than anything Europe would build for the next 3,000 years. Today, we're stepping into the world's first cities, the crowded, ambitious, and surprisingly clever urban centers of the ancient world. To answer a question most people never think to ask, how did tens of thousands of people living packed together for the first time in human history keep themselves from drowning in their own waste? There was no city hall, no sanitation department, no modern engineering degree, just human beings solving a brand new problem one brick at a time. And the answers they came up with were smarter and stranger than you'd expect. To understand why this mattered, you have to picture what a city even was 6,000 years ago. For nearly all of human history, people lived in small groups, villages, camps, scattered farms. Waste wasn't really a problem. Nature could absorb it. A handful of families spread across open land barely leave a mark on their surroundings. But starting around 4000 BCE, in the river valleys of Mesopotamia, something new began to happen. People started clustering into dense, permanent settlements, drawn together by irrigation agriculture, trade, and organized religion. Uruk, in modern-day Iraq, is often considered the world's first true city, eventually growing to tens of thousands of residents packed within mud brick walls. Suddenly, human waste, wastewater, and garbage weren't scattered across a landscape where they could quietly break down. They were concentrated, day after day, in one place, piling up faster than the surrounding environment could absorb it. This was an entirely new kind of problem, and nobody had solved it before, because nobody had ever needed to. Excavations of early Mesopotamian cities show that waste disposal there remained fairly basic for a long time. Rubbish and refuse were often dumped in streets, courtyards, or abandoned buildings, gradually raising the ground level of entire neighborhoods over generations. It worked in a rough and unglamorous way, but it also meant standing water, contaminated soil, and the kind of conditions that could easily spread disease. If cities were going to survive and grow, someone was going to have to build something better. The civilization that answered this challenge most impressively wasn't in Mesopotamia at all. It was in the Indus Valley, along the rivers of what is now Pakistan and northwest India. Around 2500 BCE, the city of Mohenjo-daro rose along the Indus River, and archaeologists who have spent decades excavating it have uncovered something remarkable. A city built almost entirely around water management. Streets were laid out in a careful grid, and running beneath nearly every one of them was a covered drain built from fired brick, designed to carry wastewater away from homes. Individual houses had their own bathing areas and latrines, and many were connected directly to this street-level drainage network through brick chutes built into the walls. Some homes even had what functioned as an early toilet, a seat positioned over a channel that led straight into the public drain system. Manholes and sump pits were built at intervals, allowing the drains to be cleaned out periodically so the system wouldn't clog and back up into the streets. Archaeologists estimate the city relied on hundreds of wells scattered throughout its neighborhoods, giving residents access to clean water without needing to trek to the river. This wasn't a lucky accident. It was infrastructure planned before a single house was built. The uniformity of the bricks used throughout Mohenjo-daro and across other Indus Valley sites hundreds of miles apart points to some form of shared building standards, a level of coordination that suggests these weren't isolated townships figuring things out on their own, but part of a much broader urban tradition stretching across the entire civilization. And unlike many later ancient cities, there's little evidence here of grand palaces or towering monuments built to glorify a single ruler. Instead, the city seems to have invested its resources into something far less glamorous and arguably far more impressive: keeping ordinary households clean, hydrated, and free of their own waste. Here's where it gets more interesting. At the center of Mohenjo-daro sits a structure archaeologists called the Great Bath, a large brick-built pool, waterproofed with a layer of natural tar, fed and drained through its own dedicated channels. It's one of the earliest known public water structures anywhere in the ancient world, and its purpose almost certainly wasn't just hygiene. Many researchers believe it served a ritual or or religious function, tied to ideas of purity that we still see echoed in South Asian traditions today, which means the people of the Indus Valley weren't just solving a practical problem, they were building meaning into their plumbing, turning something as ordinary as bathing into a shared civic and possibly spiritual act. The Indus Valley wasn't alone in figuring this out. Around the same broad era, on the windswept islands of Orkney off the coast of Scotland, a very different kind of Neolithic community was wrestling with the same basic challenge on a much smaller scale. At Skara Brae, a village dating to roughly 3200 BCE, stone houses were connected by a network of covered stone drains running beneath the settlement. Some structures even appear to have functioned as small enclosed cells attached to the drainage system, possibly some of the earliest indoor toilet-like features ever discovered. There was no writing system here, no empire, no monumental architecture, just a small farming community that had independently arrived at a version of the same solution: get the waste out of the living space and let running water carry it away. Then, centuries later, on the island of Crete, the Minoan civilization pushed the idea even further. At the Palace of Knossos, built around 1900 to 1700 BCE, archaeologists have uncovered an extensive network of terracotta pipes fitted together in interlocking sections and buried beneath the floors. These pipes carried both fresh water into the palace and wastewater out of it. Some of the palace's latrines appear to have used a flushing mechanism, where water, likely channeled from rainfall or nearby reservoirs, was used to clear waste through the pipes and away from the building. It's one of the earliest examples we have of anything resembling a flushing toilet, built over 3,000 years before the concept would become standard in Western homes. But here's the twist almost nobody expects. This knowledge didn't simply pass down generation after generation, steadily improving until we arrived at modern plumbing. It was lost, repeatedly. The Indus Valley cities went into decline around 1900 BCE for reasons scholars still debate: shifting river patterns, changing monsoon cycles, and social or economic disruption are among the leading theories. The great drains of Mohenjo-daro fell silent and were eventually buried by time. The Minoan palaces on Crete were struck by disasters, both natural and human, including a catastrophic volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera and later societal collapse. Their pipe networks, too, disappeared beneath the earth. And what came after, in much of the ancient and even medieval world, was often a step backwards, not forward. Many cities that rose in the centuries following these Bronze Age civilizations had far cruder sanitation, if they had any organized system at all. It wasn't an inevitable progress. It was invention, loss, and eventually, in places like Rome, with its aqueducts and the massive sewer known as the Cloaca Maxima, reinvention. Sometimes over 1,000 years after the first attempts had already succeeded and vanished. Even Rome's famous sewer system, often held up as the gold standard of ancient engineering, wasn't built with the same household-level ambition the Indus Valley cities had already achieved over 1,000 years earlier. The Cloaca Maxima was, at first, primarily designed to drain marshy, flood-prone land and carry stormwater away from the city center. And for much of Roman history, private access to running water and personal latrines remained a privilege of the wealthy rather than something built into every home. It's a humbling comparison. A Bronze Age city on the banks of the Indus had, in some respects, already extended basic sanitation to ordinary households, a level of everyday accessibility that many later, more famous civilizations wouldn't fully match for a very long time. Which brings us to the real revelation at the heart of this story. The idea that sanitation is a modern achievement, a triumph of 19th and 20th century engineering, isn't quite right. Human beings figured out the basic principles: separate the waste from the water you drink, use gravity and covered channels to carry it away, plan your city around the flow of water, independently in multiple places, thousands of years before any of these civilizations could speak to one another. Mohenjo-daro's brick drains, Skara Brae's stone channels, and Knossos' terracotta pipes were not built by people who shared knowledge. They were built by different peoples in different climates, facing the same unavoidable problem that comes with living close together. What do you do with what a city produces every single day? And each of them arrived through observation, trial, and remarkably careful engineering at strikingly similar answers. What this tells us about the ancient world is something worth sitting with. These were not primitive societies stumbling through history, waiting for modern science to arrive and rescue them. They were problem solvers, urban planners, and engineers in every meaningful sense, working with the materials and knowledge available to them, and often succeeding in ways that wouldn't be matched again for millennia. The next time you turn on a faucet or flush a toilet without a second thought, it's worth remembering that somewhere beneath the dust of Pakistan and under the windswept grass of a Scottish island, the very first versions of that same idea were already running, quietly, ingeniously, thousands of years before anyone thought to call it plumbing.